I want to introduce Travis Steffen. We're just gonna have a conversation, kind of like we do at StartUpGrind. Travis is native Muscatine guy, graduated from MHS in 2005. His mother is a colleague of mine at college, one of our teachers, and through her, I've kind of, over the years, heard little bits about his startup journey, and he's, I guess we would say, kind of in transition from one startup to another opportunity. So he's spending some time at home with his folks in Muscatine. She got a hold of me yesterday and said, "Hey, Travis is in town. He'd like to come to your event." And I said, "I'd love to have a conversation with him in front of you guys." So he's happy and willing to do that. So that's what we're going to do. Travis has been a serial entrepreneur. He went to University of Northern Iowa, got a couple of degrees there. He was telling me it was a football injury that ended his football career, and that's what turned him into what we see today, an entrepreneur. So without further ado, give Travis a round of applause, and we'll start there. Thanks for coming. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so let's just start this. I don't really know your story a whole lot. So start us, let's start this way. What was before your football injury, what was your first lemonade stand type business? How did you become an entrepreneur?
It was pretty close to that, actually. My mom used to have garage sales. We lived right next to high school. My mom used to have garage sales, and she would post my sister and I up in the driveway selling cookies and Kool-Aid, and we usually came out a little bit better than she did for the garage sale. So
cool.
That was the first one. And
how old were you?
Oh man, probably 6, I'm guessing.
Right.
And I get here and there would have a little something, but I was never really the guy that would always have something going on. Like so many of my peers have always said that they have been. So I never really fell into that role until I was, it must have been 2007 or 2008.
Yeah, when you were at UNI.
Yeah.
So what was the first business idea that you started with? Didn't you go through the Entrepreneurship Center program?
I did. Well, kind of, yeah. So as soon as I popped my Achilles tendon 2.5 years into college, I had not really taken school seriously at all. I was basically just a full-time football player, skating by on minimum course load, and never went to the library, never studied, but thankfully had just natural ability to pass my tests. So I had an idea with a few friends of mine over the summer after that happened, and I was still in a cast. I was rehabbing to build these bed lofts in the dorms, and we came up with this crazy awesome business plan, and as everyone does, we ran the numbers of how much money we would make if we actually did it. And as a college student, you have no money. I'm sure everyone can relate. You have no money. You have absolutely no money. So anything seems like all the money in the world. And we were like, oh my God, we might make $10,000 on this thing. And it seemed like such a crazy amount of money at the time because we had $10, $20 per week to buy beer and whatnot. So
the important stuff.
We
can edit that out, right, Chad?
we came to find that after we had built the whole business plan and I'd read a few different books on how to do that because I was an exercise physiology and biomechanics major. I realized we went to the university and they're like, no, we have an exclusive contract with bedlofts.com, so you can't do any of this. So it kind of put an axe in all of our plans. But I still kind of had I didn't want to give up the fact that there was money on the table that was this close. So I saw a TV show, probably a couple months later. I had been boxing since I was 12, so I got into MMA when I was 17. After football was over, for me, I got back into it, and I had been coaching and kind of in it a little bit the whole time. But I was really interested in this clothing brand called Tap Out at the time. It was 2008, right at the height of their popularity. And they were doing a lot with the UFC. They were a title sponsor of the UFC. And so I saw the guys that were behind the brand, and they're just these 3 goofy looking guys with a whole bunch of just ridiculous tattoos and clown makeup and crazy stuff. And I was like, if those guys can do this and have a TV show, and their company was valued at like $500 million at the time, I was like, I know I'm smarter than those guys. I can do that for sure. So started a company called Sin. It was basically a tap out clone. We did everything that they did with our brand name on it because I had no imagination at the time. And started that, ran it for the next 2 years or so. And I just watched this guy, Dan Caldwell, who, like, if anyone follows MMA, his name's Punk Ass. Like, that's what the MMA world knows him as. That's what his TV show is about. He's been on a bunch of shows since then. He's like the brains behind the operation. I was like, one day I will be like that guy with his, like, sitting on the throne in his clothing empire. Came out to realize that I didn't really enjoy the clothing space. I wasn't really, as you can tell, I'm not exactly the most fashionable person in the world. This is the uniform that we typically wear in Silicon Valley. So this is what I've worn since college. I'm not really a fashion guy. So my mom said that I should probably do something with my degree since I was just entering grad school at the time for exercise physiology. I knew I didn't want to actually use that degree. I just wasn't ready to be done with college yet because I somehow refocused on my studies and got done with my undergrad in about 3.5 years. So I just jumped into grad school because I wanted to stay in the party, you know? And so that's why I went to grad school. And it was, to be honest with you, it was kind of like the grad school program at UNI at the time for me was kind of a joke. It was a really good program, but the course load was about half as much as I was taking for a full-time student. So I had a lot of time on my hands to like build companies. So I realized that, I think I read in the student newspaper that the entrepreneurship center, which I had never been to on the other side of campus, like gave you, like if you were a student with a business and you could give them like some sort of just credible business plan, they would just give you an office with computers and like people who would help you and resources. And like they would enter you into competitions and get you money. And I was like, of course I'm gonna go like learn how to write a business plan overnight from like a template book, gave it to them. They told me it was like the best business plan that they had ever seen in their lives and gave me an office. And it was crazy because it was like nicer than my apartment. So, and like it came with computers and like space to hold inventory for the clothing company. And I used some of my student loan money to build a website, or to pay people to build a website for me for like a fitness instructional business. That was called allmuscle.net, and that was in 2007, probably about 6 months after I started the clothing company. So those were the two very first like awful, terrible businesses that I started. Ended up like the fate of those companies was I ended up selling the clothing company that had just stagnated and I was just unenthused about. In I think 2009, I sold that company for whatever I could get for it, probably like 10 grand. Broke even, I would say, and maybe a little bit less than broke even. And then allmuscle.net, I built up a little bit, and then somebody that I had never met before found me, and he was like a software developer that was really interested in fitness. He had a site called workoutbox.com that was just like a free internet forum for fitness that was ranking really well in search. And he was like, I don't have any credentials, I don't have a user base, but I have a site that's getting organic search traffic that has a better domain name than yours. Do you want to merge? So we worked out a deal with him and his partner that I would get 15% of the company, and I would bring all my users and like my name and my credentials to the platform. And like over the course of time, I just kept buying more and more pieces of the company and bought out the third partner, and eventually owned 45% of that. And we sold that in 2014 in February. So that was the fate of those two. And then since then, long story short, I started a payment processing application just on the learning through osmosis of watching my partner Simon do what he did on Workout Box, working with offshore developers and like writing their briefs, mapping user experiences. Just learned a little bit through osmosis, built the user experience for my first app. It was a payment processing app that we completed construction on in 2010, and then took it to my lawyer that I hired like that day, and he basically told me, if you don't have licensure, like an MTL, money transfer license, or an escrow license, or any of these other things that this technology that no one has ever seen before and nobody trusts, hasn't been vetted for security, and does something different than a bank or an escrow service, like there was no template for what we were trying to do. He's like, you have to like go raise $1 million. And I was like so green at the time. I was 23. No one in their right mind should have ever given me a penny. I had no idea what I was doing in comparison, but I thought I was a genius. And so I ended up turning around and selling that company to a Canadian financial institution, which I don't think they've done anything with. I check in on it now and then because I retained 1% of it. From there, I realized that I did know how to roll out these apps, but I needed to stay in the fitness space because that was kind of like what I knew. So I started Action Junkie Labs in 2011, built 21 apps in the span of 6 months, and then realized that I didn't know anything about marketing. So I had these 21 apps that were just sitting there. And they were getting like organic installs, and I was making some money, but I wasn't really stoked on it either, so I fell out of love with that project, got entrepreneurial ADD, and sold that company in 2012 just to a private buyer in Las Vegas. Then 2013, we sold that in 2013. 2014, that's when we sold Workout Box. That was my biggest exit at the time. We sold that to a publicly traded company in Nevada called TGC, which bought it during a roll-up, basically for the stock boost. And I don't know if they've done much with it, but at its height, it was doing about 500,000 monthly uniques from just organic search, which is free. And it was incredible because everything was all gravy for us, and we were so naive to think that that's always the way it would pan out because of the way we architected the site. And so we threw our energy into a few other projects. I started a web development subscription-based service, essentially saying like for a monthly subscription, you can share programmers with like other companies that are trying to build things. That went pretty well, but really quickly found out that like the agency model was very labor intensive and not for me. But we were making, I think in year one, we made about 170,000. And it was just like me and then a few outsourced programmers and like someone in Minnesota with an MBA that I could make the project manager and interface with the client. I didn't have a whole lot of patience for it. So I sold that company then 11 months after I started it, and turned around, and one of the companies that I got involved with after Workout Box with my partner from that company was called Upshare, which we built and then sold this past August. So all in all, and I'm forgetting one, there was a company that we started in a weekend and sold 6 months later after not touching it since then to a Texas oil company that wanted to make an investment. That was a social media management company for healthcare practices. Super boring, but very, very niche and easy, very, very easy to find a giant list of healthcare like facilities that you could just contact, and they want their information readily known. So that was kind of an experiment that we ran. So since 2009, there have been 7 exits. I'm leaving out all of the failures along the way. But I just recently took my first non-founder role at a Silicon Valley startup called Auto Lotto. Basically, it's the first way to buy Powerball tickets on a mobile app. We built like a giant political lobbying force. We built a really great technology team. I brought a few of my really close friends from the tech space to be like founding team members. And we just closed a $20 million round of funding. And we're about to start a raise for another 200 here in Q4. So that's
200 million.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let's go there first. Because that's money that makes our head spin, right, Angela?
And that
Okay.
product hasn't even, just so everyone knows, like that product is not even live yet.
So, 20 million round of funding, and looking to go into another round of funding. Explain to us what that means
Sure.
in non-Silicon Valley
Well,
terminology.
I mean, that's the only way I would know how to
Right,
explain it,
right.
because I don't have an MBA, I don't have a business degree or anything. Everything I just learned through the process of screwing things up. I was never a venture-backed founder, not once until I became involved with this company. So I had no clue what we tried to raise a round of funding with Upshare, and then very quickly realized that like we wanted to sell the company instead. But basically the way that the venture capital system works is you create an entity and you sell a few people on the vision of the entity, and they take a huge risk for a big upside, and that's your seed round. That gets you to from nothing to a prototype. But you only raise as much money as you need to like build a few founding team members and build a prototype. When you run out, your entity theoretically is worth more than it was. So when you go into your A round or a bridge round, whatever comes between those, depending on the structure of your company, you have something that's worth more. So you can sell a smaller piece for more money. So that's when you turn around and you start approaching like more serious investors. Usually you're wanting like an institutional investor or angel investors that have experience investing, that they call value-added investors. They're not just dumb money like family, friends, and fools. You're bringing to the table like an entity that actually should have at least a semi-sound plan of attack, a good working prototype that has been validated by customers. They then buy a piece of that. Sometimes it's just a straight equity buy. Sometimes it's what they call a convertible note. But usually like you're only raising enough money to go to market up to a certain point. And the certain point is when you feel like you're ready to either branch out and attract a different market, create more products for your line, what have you. When you get to the point where you feel like your entity within its current plan will be worth more money, you go and you raise a Series B. And then you do the same thing with a Series C when you're trying to make acquisitions. And then you can raise a series. You can continue that process if you want to, but usually before even a Series B happens, you either get acquired or you realize that your company is going to go busto, or sometimes after a Series B you decide to go public. Very, very rarely. But usually somewhere along the line, if you're doing something semi-reasonable, someone is going to try to buy you, or you're going to try to proactively sell the company. So that's kind of the...
So as you're talking about like in the seed round, in a Silicon Valley startup, it's a tech startup in that kind of tech space, if I'm raising some seed capital to fund this company, if you're the venture capitalist, what are you buying into at that point in time?
If I'm a VC, first and foremost, like there are very specific investors who will be seed investors that are comfortable taking an absurd amount of risk for an absurd amount of upside. They're gamblers because most companies fail. There are some VC firms that will invest at the seed level. Usually when that happens, they're investing personal capital. Only rarely will they invest their institutional funds, because it usually won't be worth their time to do their due diligence and invest a very small amount of money. So usually it's going to be relationship based. It's going to be how much do they believe in you, how much do they believe in your vision, how much do they believe in the other team members that are working on pulling it off. So that really comes down to like how much you've educated yourself, what you've done to date, anything you've done in the past, what your experience is, what like industry credibility that you might have, any relationships you might have with buyers or clients or customers that you can then bring into this entity and potentially make sales and get them their money back, because they're business owners as well. So they just want their return.
And at that point in a seed round, if I might not even have a product prototype or anything that I've even sold.
Right.
I don't really have any revenue yet. I'm just building something.
Yeah. So you're not going to have anything really. Like that you can go to market with yet. The seed stage is usually to build something to go to market with. Occasionally, if you didn't anticipate raising funds from the very beginning, you might have invested some of your own money to build some traction, to build a prototype, to do a little something, at least test the market. Some of you, if you've read some of the more like buzzword laden books lately, you'll heard of minimum viable product, like the lean startup kind of sense of the word, like the minimum amount that you can possibly build to test the viability in the market. That's really where the seed stage comes in. And that's one of the things that you can use to convince your investors to give you money.
Right. And that's in the way we approach things, because we don't really have tech startups that are in the process. So we're looking at minimum viable product and trying to do something like that so that we can actually get out, generate some revenue, score some real customers.
Right.
So go back to Workout Bot and some of the other startups that you're involved with that you operated for a fair amount of time. If they were apps, what kind of revenue model did you have? How'd the money come?
Yeah. Workout Box had a subscription model. We basically sold a digital product, access to like exclusive interactions with trainers, workouts personalized for you, all this kind of stuff for a fixed monthly subscription, the exact diet you should be having for your body type, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, like with digital products, you're paying for access, or you're paying for something that does not need to be held on a shelf. You don't have to hold inventory. You don't have to have a physical location. You don't have to, in a lot of cases, like in some instances, like at that time, you didn't even have to pay sales tax on them. So it was actually a really cool business model because it was completely automated. Like if you can set it up in a very specific way, like you really don't have to touch a whole lot. You don't have to ship anything. You don't really have to interface with customers that often. You can pretty much outsource, systemize, and automate everything across the board, and it just runs. Now, obviously, you get what you put into it. So if you put forth time and effort to try to grow the product, optimize the funnels, and get more people like through and sticking around, it's going to result in a better bottom line. But in contrast to like a physical product that I used to have in my first company, I realized that right away there were a lot of headaches that I could avoid by just cutting like physical goods out of the equation.
So, Workout Bot, when you sold it, how many customers did you have?
We had a list of about 210,000 customers, and those had all come over the course of about 4 years, 4.5 years of just like organic search traffic. At the time, we were ranking like top 3 for keywords like exercises or like workouts or just really ridiculously common search terms like that, because no one else really knew what the hell they were doing. And we were competing with like Muscle and Fitness magazine and bodybuilding.com, and we were just two dudes on opposite sides of the world. Like I had never met my business partner Simon for the first 7 years that we worked together. We never even like met in person until I recruited him to Auto Lotto as head of engineering, and we met at 500 Startups demo day in like this past November. So it just kind of goes to show you the power of a remote working environment. We never met a single one of our programmers. I probably met 2 employees in the first 6 companies that I started, and both of them we ended up having to fire. So like the best ones that we had, essentially just they did their thing. They were performance based. And they were like self-policing. They would think for themselves. They would problem solve, and it's like the best kind of employee you can have, in my opinion.
Cool. All right. So talking about organic search, I mean, and getting your keywords found. What's the secret sauce to getting your small business to have people find you when they go searching for it? Well,
it's a lot tougher than it used to be. I'll put it that way. I would not build a business around search engine optimization anymore. It's a bonus when you can get it, but at that time it was so lucrative because you could just very easily, I mean, the first and foremost, the secret is no secret. It's you have to become what people are looking for. Like if you imagine looking up a certain keyword and finding you, like what would that look like? And for me as the user that was searching to say, that's exactly what I wanted to find. So you basically have to create that experience, and then you can layer in like the little tricks and tactics that you find on like blog posts and whatnot to be a little bit more searchable with like your meta information. But anymore, like the problem that most people would encounter is like everyone thought that they were smarter than Google, and like nobody. You are not smart. If you're sitting here in this audience, or if you know anybody, no one you know is smarter than Google. They're the smartest people in the world, and they're all working collectively for one specific goal, and you're not going to game them. So like if you can just be something that will augment their user's experience, they're going to operate in their own self-interest and promote you. And if you can look at it through that lens, like, and it works to varying degree in other like more niche search related areas. Like we had an application that one of the growth engines was like appearing in the WordPress plugin store. And that was so much easier to game because they hadn't focused a million people on like, you know, the algorithms that drive the search for that. So we could really easily like keyword stuff and just game that system really quickly. And it's still the same thing to a certain degree with like the App Store. It's still like light years behind like Google.com. And it really comes down to like your download to review ratio, how often people are searching for a specific term, finding your app, and then downloading it, which you can pay people to do artificially. So you can synthetically rise up those rankings. But it's not really something that I would really build a business around, because the second that algorithm changes, all your traffic can either just like double or just disappear, and it's not really a sustainable engine.
So probably the advice for anybody starting any kind of a business is to partner with Google in however way they will allow you to partner.
Well,
or
I mean,
use their tools. I mean,
I would take it a step further and say, like, before you start a business, think about it with like acquisition and growth in mind. Think about it through that lens of before you think of a product that's like going to be the most awesome thing in the world. Think about who you need to build that product for, what problem are you solving, and if they were proactively searching for your solution, where would they look? Given that, if you go look there, you can see who your competitors are, you can see the bar that they've set, you can see the price points that you're going to have to compete against, and you can start to explore like the inroads of what can get you placement in like whatever engine that is, whether it's digital marketing, whether it's offline, whether it's viral, word of mouth, whether it's like direct mail or anything like old school like that, which still works very well in select cases. Like you have to make sure that you're able to compete against the noise that everyone is used to. So like if you can think about the product with growth and like how you're going to acquire those customers, like in the forefront of your mind, that's what your investors will want to see. That's what's going to drive the money into your bank account. And it's really going to be what keeps you in business.
customer acquisition. Mm-hmm. Got to have customers, right? You don't have
Exactly.
customers, you don't have business.
Yeah.
All right. Tell us about what are some of the key lessons that you've learned, just general broad entrepreneurial lessons, good ones and bad ones over the years, to share with these guys?
One of the good ones and one of the bad ones is you always think that you're smarter than you are. And it's great because if you're kind of ignorant about how dumb you actually are, you're going to have more confidence to go try some things that people who have a little bit more knowledge wouldn't try. And that particular avenue might be a little bit less saturated as a result. You might not be clouded in the way people say that things should be done, which is like one of the things that stifles innovation. So that's probably one of the good and bad things that you can do. A bad thing is, you know, through that lens is like, if you think that you're smarter than you are, then you're probably going to be inhibited from learning. I would say one of the things that has been the worst for me, that I've only started to come out of in the last year, as soon as you start to see a little bit of success as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you start to think of yourself as some authority figure about all things business and entrepreneurship, and you start to think that like you have the key, you have the code that like can solve anyone's business problem. They should just come to you with that. And the reality is, like, first and foremost, it's such a dangerous mindset to have, because it takes you out of that like beginner's mindset that always keeps you learning and moving forward. But it also, it also ensures that the people around you are going to think that you're just like a massive pain in the ass, and you're not going to have like that just really excited. Because I mean, if I'm having a conversation with any one of you, would you like me to just dictate things that I think that I know about you, or would you like much more enjoy my company and be much more willing to help me in my endeavors if I were actually genuinely interested in trying to learn from you and whatever your experiences are? I think a lot of founders will get just like, they, for whatever reason, just get a big kick out of finally feeling like they know after so many years of not knowing what they're doing, and then telling the world. So within the last like year and a half or 2 years, I've just proactively like stopped teaching anything completely, unless somebody really digs and asks questions, which is kind of ironic because I'm sitting up here right now, but unless somebody really digs and asks questions, I will just listen and I'll ask them questions, and I won't really volunteer too much about what I do, just because I know that I will benefit so much more from like picking up what I can from everybody around me. So like that's, I would say, the number one negative thing that I've run into that I've started to correct.
So can you point to an experience or a time or a person that caused you to finally say, oh yeah, I act like I know more than I really do, and then you step back?
Yeah. So if you recall, one of the first stories I told was about one of the founders of Tap Out, Dan Caldwell. So years after that first company, I ended up, through a series of events, becoming like business partners and incredibly good friends with him, in a company that I co-founded back in like late 2014. It was like him, myself, and another person, and like it kind of hit me when we had a conversation at one point where he was telling me how inspiring I was to him and how much he was learning from me. And I kind of had like cause to pause there for a minute, because most people would just like, have a huge ego boost there. And I started to realize, man, like this is a guy that I've looked up to for a long time, and he shouldn't be listening to anything I'm saying at all. Because I'm just this punk kid. I was, I think, 26 at the time, 26 or 27. And he's got 3 kids. Tap Out made like $850 million last year. He's got all sorts of other companies, a huge real estate empire, and he's like taking the time and asking me questions and learning from me. And I'm thinking to myself, I haven't done that nearly as much as I should. And I'm so far behind him that I should be doing this more. So I would say that's one of the main catalyst moments that happened.
That's a cool story. Yeah. All right. So we'll probably wrap this up. I always finish my Startup Grind conversations like this with a 2-part question. Mm-hmm. So the what's the best part and what's the worst part about being an entrepreneur?
The best part, I would say, is like the feeling of having like an unlimited ceiling for like financial growth, and for like the flexibility of your schedule. You essentially get to dictate like where it ends and where it begins. There's no one telling you that if you work incredibly hard for the next 3 years of your life, you're going to get $1 raise an hour, or you're working super hard to get like $20,000 more a year, taxes and all this kind of stuff or whatever, right? And just knowing like, even if you're scraping against the bottom, knowing like, okay, if I just keep on my grind, next year at this time, I could be way up here. And there's no limit to like how quickly that rise could happen if you just get your shit together, you know? So like that's the best part to me. I would say the worst part is like, you get to choose, I mean, you have so much flexibility that you get to choose the 12 to 14 hour days that you get to work every day. So, I mean, it is like, there are lifestyle businesses and people choose to like only work a few hours a week at times once they've spent years setting things up and automating. But until that time comes, like it really is a lot of hard work, and you are responsible for your own meal ticket. No one is going to pay your bills for you. There will be months where you're terrified, and like you will probably go broke a couple times. Like I've gone broke a couple times, and for those of you like who are terrified of it, go broke. Like just get it over with. Just go out and go broke, and realize that it's not as big of a deal as you think it is, and that you're not gonna like die, and your life is not over. Your family and friends will not abandon you. You're not gonna be like sent to a leper colony. You will be okay. Like you're gonna be fine, and like you're gonna figure it out, and you're never gonna be hungrier than you are in that moment when you're like, you don't know where you're gonna buy your next ramen. So like, and you're going to get out of it, and then you're gonna think that you're incredible, and you're gonna way over leverage everything, and you're gonna go broke again. But that time you're gonna be like, it's not that big of a deal. I'm not scared. I've done this before. I can get out. And every other time after that, you're going to be a lot more likely to be willing to take risks on yourself, where most people who have lived in that really safe salaried bubble have not been able to get to. And just like investing in yourself, educating yourself, like and taking gambles on something that you really truly believe in won't feel scary, like nearly as scary. Like you're gonna be bummed when you go broke again, but like you'll get over it in a couple of days and you'll be fine. So like that's
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Who's got some questions for Travis? Yes, ma'am.
So out of, I think I counted 9, did you make any kind of money? You know, your first one you said a little under, second one, I think you said none or whatever. Did you make any out of selling all?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone was essentially more than the last. You learn a little bit more every single time. We've sold companies for $10,000. We've sold companies for a couple million. Workout box that I referenced, that one actually sold for $500,000 in cash. And like that deal was, I mean, most deals when you sell your companies, they're not going to be all cash deals. Like you're going to get equity, you're going to get payouts over time, you're going to get installments, you're going to get whatever. But we went with a broker with that deal because we were proactively selling it. So that was my favorite deal because of the structure of the deal, because like we decided to sell the company, we hired a broker, 3 days later they found a buyer. The buyer had transferred funds into the account 2 days later, and then 30 days after we delivered them, like here's the documentation on how you run the site and everything, and here are all the employees' contact information ready to go. Like 30 days later, like we were in the clear, and like the money was ours, and I had never seen that much money in my life at the time. And so like immediately went and invested it and blew a whole bunch of it, but like that's just kind of what happens. And knowing that you can do that though, and that those options exist, kind of leads you to the bigger ones and the bigger ones over time. But to be honest with you, like what you can't learn, even when I'm telling you now, what you can't learn until you experience it is how much of a huge letdown like having a lot of money is. It really is not that different. I promise you, like having a nice house, having a fancy car, having like going out to eat every night in LA and all this kind of stuff, it's cool for a minute, and then eventually you're like, man, I don't need this stuff. Like I was so happy for the first 25 years of my life living in crappy college apartments and living at home with my parents in high school, and like I'm fine just having a normal scenario. And when you're not chasing money and you're instead like, all right, I'm going to go solve a problem that I care about and do things that I really believe in with the people that I love working with every single day. The weird thing that happens is like you make so much more money doing that. And it's like the weird, I don't know how to describe it, but when you're not focused on the money and what that can bring you, and you're focused on like the problem you're solving, and you're excited and passionate about like what you're actually, like the impact you're making and the legacy that you're leaving and the people that you're employing and the people that you're helping, you do so much better than you ever could if you were just like all about the dollars and cents.
Cool. What's a typical day in your shoes like?
Gosh, I'll rewind back before this past week, because I'll be on the road a crazy amount over the next month, from Chicago to Singapore to 5 other different countries. That's not a typical schedule for me. Usually like I'll get up around 6, I'll like answer some emails. I really started like lately paying a lot more attention to like my mindset. So I start talking about like verbalizing like what I'm grateful for in my life, what I'm excited about, like wishing good things for family and friends. I'm not a religious guy, so I've never really done that before, but like recently it started becoming more important to me. I realized the impact that it made on me, so that's something I pay attention to. I go to the gym because it just like kickstarts the wheels. It gets your mind working very effectively. And then I just dive in. Like that's my office. Like I've always been completely mobile and remote. So at my place in Marina Del Rey, I'll just go sit by the pool and I'll work from there all day. I'll bring my meals over there, and I'll just like that I cooked that morning, I'll eat, and then work. And then at the end of the day, I'll just kind of like cut it off, which I started doing within the last year, of like setting a hard stop at like 6 o'clock. And then the rest of the day is just kind of like, it's really normal. It's like I'll binge watch The Walking Dead or like whatever everybody else does. And I'll go hang out with friends, and it's not crazy. It's as crazy as it used to be, where it was literally like wake up, start working, stop working, sleep. Like that's how it was for the first 4 or 5 years.
So you have like people behind you and stuff that help you through the process and stuff then?
Well, I mean, yeah, we've got a team that is today is very, very specialized. Like when I was a founder, up until like about 6 months ago, you have to wear so many hats that like you're spread so thin that you eventually realize I have to put blinders on and focus on one thing, and everything else can wait and the world won't end. So like that's when you really need to have a team that can solve their own problems and that can think for themselves. A lot of times when people outsource, they will they'll find people that can really do very specific things, but they need to be babysat and they need to be micromanaged. So we won't even touch like people like that anymore with a 10-foot pole, because it's just like it gives me 2 jobs then, right? Like I have to tell you what to do and I have to do my own thing. So so that's, I would say right now that's a day in the life.
Cool. One more question. Anybody else got anything? One more? I don't know about you guys. I'm getting hungry. Faith? Okay. All right. All right. Food. That's the question. It's that time.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right.
Appreciate it, Travis.